I still remember the sound of the chair scraping against the floor more clearly than I remember the words she said, because in that moment, before the sentence even finished leaving her mouth, something inside me already knew it was over. Not the marriage exactly, not yet, but the quiet understanding I thought we shared, the unspoken agreement that after all these years I belonged somewhere in that house, at that table, in that family. Because I had come home early that evening, carrying the same bag of groceries I'd carried every Friday for years, the same bread she liked, the same dessert her son pretended not to care about but always finished first, and the house smelled like roasted chicken and spices, familiar and warm, the kind of smell that makes you loosen your tie before you even sit down. And for a brief second I thought maybe tonight would be normal, maybe tonight I'd just sit down, eat, listen, and go to bed without feeling like I was walking on glass. But as I pulled out the chair at the head of the table, the one I'd always sat in before her son moved back in, she looked up at me with that tight smile she'd been practicing lately, the one that never reached her eyes, and she said it calmly, almost politely, as if she were correcting a waiter instead of erasing her husband. "That seat is my son's, not yours." And the room went quiet in a way that felt heavier than shouting. Her son didn't look at me. He just kept scrolling on his phone, already certain of his place, already certain I wasn't part of it, and for a split second my instinct screamed at me to say something, to remind her of the years, the bills, the nights I stayed up when she was sick, the school fees I paid when his real father disappeared, the holidays I skipped so there would be enough money, but something stopped me, not pride, not fear, just exhaustion. The kind that settles into your bones after realizing you've been explaining. The moment she said it, I knew my place in that house was over, not because of the words themselves, but because of how easily they left her mouth, like she had been practicing them for a long time, waiting for the right moment to finally say them out loud. And what hurts the most is that I didn't even feel angry, I felt embarrassed. The kind of embarrassment that burns quietly in your chest when you realize you are the only one in the room who didn't see it coming, because all I had done was pull out a chair, the same chair I had sat on for years, the same chair where I paid bills, planned futures, and ate dinners I barely tasted after long days at work, and I hadn't even sat down yet when she looked at me and said, calm and firm, "That seat is my son's, not yours." And for a second I honestly thought I'd misheard her, that maybe she meant something else, maybe it was a joke that landed badly. But then I saw her son already sitting back comfortably, scrolling on his phone without even looking up at me, completely sure of himself, completely sure that the place I thought was mine had already been taken, and the room went silent in a way that felt intentional, like everyone was waiting to see what I would do next, whether I would explode, argue, remind them of everything I had sacrificed, and my throat tightened because I suddenly remembered all the moments that led to this one. The nights I came home late with grocery bags cutting into my hands, the weekends I skipped rest so there would be enough money for school fees, the quiet promises I made to myself that one day it would feel like family, not obligation, and standing there with my hand still resting on the back of that chair, I realized something terrifyingly clear, that I had been slowly written out of my own life without noticing, so I didn't react, not because I was weak, but because reacting would have meant admitting that this moment surprised me, and it didn't, not really, it just confirmed what I had been avoiding for years, so I pushed the chair back under the table gently, as if noise would make things worse, picked up my plate, and walked to the small side chair near the wall, the one meant for guests or people who don't quite belong, and I sat down there quietly, and she didn't apologize, she didn't hesitate, she just started serving food like this was the most natural thing in the world, and as I ate in silence, tasting nothing, listening to conversations that didn't include me, I understood this wasn't about a seat at all, it was about position, about hierarchy, about who mattered and who was merely tolerated. And while they talked about weekend plans and school schedules, I kept chewing slowly, forcing myself to swallow every bite, because standing up and leaving right then would have been dramatic, and drama would have given them something to blame later, something to point at. And I didn't want that. I wanted them to remember this moment exactly as it was, that I stayed, that I accepted it, that I didn't fight back, because silence, I was learning, isn't always surrender. Sometimes it's the moment you finally stop begging for a place that was never really yours. And as the plates emptied and her son walked away without clearing his dish, leaving it behind like someone else would handle it, I felt something settle inside me, not anger, not sadness, but clarity, the kind that comes when you finally see the truth without excuses, that I had been shrinking myself for years to fit into a space that kept getting smaller, choosing peace over honesty until peace itself had no room for me anymore. That night I washed my plate myself even though no one asked me to, not because I felt obligated, but because I needed something small and physical to hold on to while my mind replayed the scene over and over. Her voice, calm and certain, his silence, confident and dismissive, and my own reflection in the dark kitchen window, standing there like a guest who had overstayed his welcome. And when I finally went to bed, I noticed how the house felt different. Not louder, not colder, just indifferent, like it would continue functioning perfectly fine whether I was in it or not. And that realization stayed with me in the days that followed, in the way no one noticed when I left early for work or came home late, in the way decisions were made without my input, meals planned without asking if I'd be there, conversations stopping the moment I entered the room, and I didn't confront it, not because I was afraid, but because I wanted to understand how long this had been happening. Without me realizing, and the answer was uncomfortable, it had been happening for years, in small moments I'd ignored because acknowledging them would have meant questioning the life I had built, the sacrifices I justified, the belief that patience would eventually turn into respect. But respect doesn't grow where presence is taken for granted, and one evening, about a week later, I came home to find my closet half empty, my clothes folded neatly into boxes I hadn't packed, and she explained it. Casually, like she was reorganizing storage, saying her son needed more space, and I nodded again, not because I agreed, but because the nod had become a language we both understood, the language of endings without arguments, and that night I slept on the couch for the first time, staring at the ceiling fan as it spun slowly, realizing I couldn't remember the last time someone had asked how my day was, not out of politeness, but interest, and something shifted then, quietly, not dramatically. I stopped trying to insert myself where I was no longer wanted. I stopped fixing things around the house, stopped covering expenses that weren't mine, stopped making myself useful just to justify my presence, and they noticed, not immediately, but gradually, when things started breaking and bills started stacking and questions started being asked, and when she finally sat across from me at the same table weeks later, in the same seat she'd taken from me, and asked, carefully, almost cautiously, why I had become so distant. I looked at her, and for the first time in years I didn't rush to explain myself, I didn't defend, I didn't list sacrifices, I just said, calmly, I didn't become distant, I finally realized where I stand. And she stared at me like she was hearing a language she didn't understand, because people get used to the version of you that asks for less, and they panic when you stop. And that night I packed my own things, slowly, deliberately, choosing what mattered and leaving what didn't. And when I walked out, there was no shouting, no tears, no last-minute apologies, just the sound of the door closing behind me, firm and final. And months later, when she called, her voice unsteady, telling me things weren't working, that she missed how things used to be, I listened quietly, the same way I had listened that night at the table, and when she finished, waiting for a response, I told her the truth she hadn't expected, that I had finally found peace in a place where I wasn't constantly proving my worth. And as I ended the call, I thought back to that chair, that moment, and I understood something I wish I'd learned earlier, that sometimes the most painful humiliation becomes the clearest invitation to leave, and the bravest thing a man can do is accept it without begging for a seat that was never meant to be his.